Hello and welcome to the weekend update. Today we're going to talk about QQQ SPY and some of the key technology stocks like Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, and so forth. So let's go through QQQ first. So you're looking at the daily chart of QQQ. For the time being, so far, let's see, it's down around 8.5%. You can see right here, QQQ is down around 8.5%. And you can see that over the last few weeks, it's been gradually moving lower. So the price action is now negative compared to this period right here when the price action was positive. You can see that it has fallen below the daily 20 and 50 EMAs. The daily 20 EMA did provide support previously, so now that's not the case. Also, if you look at the momentum indicators, you can see MACD is moving lower. It's now crossing below the zero line right here, and RSI is now below the 50 level right here. So when RSI remains below 50, generally momentum is considered to be negative. So both price action and momentum indicators are negative at the moment. If we look at the weekly chart just to see what do we see right there. So if we look at the structure, you'll notice that since forming a low here, so we have a weekly higher low, and then this is the last weekly higher low, and then QQQ went on a massive run up. And this is the first correction we're seeing since this consolidation right here. And it's entirely possible that QQQ is in the process of finding another weekly higher low. Since this weekly higher low, maybe it's trying to find another weekly higher low. So in terms of the structure, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any break of the structure, I would say. Also, if you look at the weekly moving averages, this is the weekly 20 and this is the weekly 50, price remains above both of them. Unlike the daily chart where price structure is negative because it's been forming lower lows and the price has moved below the daily 20 and 50 EMA, but that's not the case on a weekly basis. On a weekly basis, the structure remains still positive. This correction is within the context of this uptrend, and the price remains above the moving averages. So I'm not seeing any kind of breakdown on a weekly time frame. Yes, there is weakness on the daily time frame, but not so on the weekly time frame at this point. Also notice that the momentum indicators is still positive. You see RSI remains above the weekly 50 and MACD remains above the zero line. So I'm not seeing any sort of breakdown in momentum. The momentum is still positive. Yes, they have been pulling back from an overbought reading, which is normal and healthy. But at this point, I'm not seeing any sort of a break in price structure or momentum in weekly time frame. Now, from a weekly perspective, what are some of the things I'm watching? So number one I'm watching is the weekly 20 EMA, which is right here. For QQQ, that level is around 351.66. Now, if you notice, if you look to the left, you'll notice that when price remains in an uptrend, like at the moment, you'd have to agree that on a weekly time frame, we're on an uptrend. We're moving higher. We're above, QQQ is above the moving averages. So when that is the case, you will notice right here after the COVID, this is the COVID sell-off, when QQQ was recovering, the pullbacks used to be would be coming to the weekly 20 EMA. You see right here, it's come and touched the weekly EMA right here. It undercut it during the week, but managed to hold it by the end of the week when the candle closed. And you can see that all these pullbacks have been to the weekly 20. You can see, and you can go back even further if you wanted to see. Even here, you can see that they've either pulled back to the weekly 20 or 50. If the two moving averages are close to one another, then it can pull back to either. But if the two moving averages are quite wide apart, like right here, generally you see the pullback to the first one. Even if you go further back, you'll see lots of touches to the weekly 20 EMS right here. So if this current uptrend is to remain intact, then I would expect some kind of a bounce of the weekly 20. Now, if it wants a deeper pullback and touch the weekly 50 and do that, I mean, that is also possible. I mean, that would still not jeopardize anything on a weekly time frame. Right, the weekly 50 right now is around 330. I mean, that would be a deeper correction. I mean, anything is possible, but I would basically think that this is basically where it would try and form some kind of a base and then maybe mount some kind of a rally. So this is the level I'm watching, which is, as I said, 351.66 is the level. The weekly 50 is a little bit lower than that. So let's just see what happens here. On Friday, the low was 355-ish. So, it's very close on a weekly time frame. It's very close to the weekly 20 EMA. The other thing to keep in mind is that usually when there are weekly corrections, they usually last for anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. If you look at this correction right here, you can count the candles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 6th week, you can see there was a bounce. If you look at this correction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see 5 weekly candles and then starts to move higher. If you look at here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then from the 6 weekly candles, if you look at here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So generally, the point I'm making is that corrections have two elements. One is the price element and the other one is the time element. Price element is when it pulls back by a certain amount. And the time element is that it does so over a certain period of time. So based on the previous weekly correction, I don't think we're quite there yet. I would so far I see 3 weekly consolidation candles. So if based on these consolidation, it would seem to me that there would be another couple of weekly consolidation candle still pending. It doesn't mean that it keeps going down. It basically means that they could be going sideways also as part of the consolidation. You can see that they were kind of consolidating within a narrow range. If you look right here, you can see a couple of, you can see that there are a few candles which are basically trying to form a base. So that's the time element, is that, I'm not sure that 3 weeks is enough. Maybe there's another week or two of consolidation. Maybe it consolidates and then does something like this. So that's basically how I'm thinking on a weekly time frame. So the level I'm watching is this weekly 20 EMA. The other thing is RSI, weekly RSI. When the market is in an uptrend, weekly RSI should not fall below the 50 level. It should not. If it does, it should be like a very brief trip and then back again. If you look at to the left again, so during the COVID recovery, you see these pullbacks never pushed RSI below 50. See, this pullback never pushed RSI below 50. The only time RSI fell below 50 right here was when at the beginning of 2022, when we had this bear market. When this happens and RSI remains underneath the 50 level, that's when you can expect weak price action. But in an up market, you should not see RSI below 50. So even if you go back, during periods of up, so right here, you can see this is basically what I'm talking about. For a brief period of time, it dips below the 50, but generally it remains above 50. We had a slightly bigger correction right here, and that's when RSI was below 50. But if you keep going to the left, you should not see RSI under 50 and remaining 50. Even during this time, you can see touches to 50 and then up, touches to 50 and then up. So that's basically what you want to look for. You want to see whether or not this RSI is now still, RSI closed at 57.63 on a weekly time frame. Even here, you can see that RSI touched and moved slightly below and then moved higher. So this is another thing that you want to look at, is you don't want to see RSI underneath 50 and then remains underneath 50. If so, then we have a bigger issue. But that's not the case at the moment. The other thing is that MACD shouldn't be underneath the 0 level. in an uptrend. So at the moment, we do not have any conditions which suggest that there's something nasty is going to happen in QQQ. At least I'm not seeing that either in the price action or in momentum indicators. So I would assume that the weakness I'm seeing on a daily basis is temporary. Now, what sort of things am I looking at on a daily time frame to indicate to me maybe the bottom is in? See, at the moment, after an 8.5% decline, shares are oversold. So I do expect some kind of a bounce. So generally, when markets bottom, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Rally to maybe this moving averages, and then another leg down, a shallow pullback, and then something like this. So you want to see like a double bottom or higher low kind of a thing, something like this. If you look right here, so you see pullback and then a rebound and then a shallow pullback and then go. So you want to see a structure like this. You want to see pullback, then a rebound, and then another leg down. So when you see something like this, that's an indication that market is getting ready for a bottom. So that's what I'm looking for in a price action. On the RSI side, on the momentum side, I'm looking for something like this: pullback, rally, a higher low, and then reclaim the 50 level. So this is the sort of thing that I'm looking for in RSI. So on RSI, it would be something like this. So move up, pull back, and then does something like this and reclaims the 50 level. It must reclaim the 50 level. And on the price action, you want to see something like this. If you see something like this, that's an indication that market is getting ready to basically turn the corner. But we don't have any signs at the moment. So I'm looking for an oversold bounce, maybe to this area. So these moving averages will now act as resistance. So I would be surprised if it does something like this. If it makes a V-shaped recovery, I would be really surprised. I mean, market can do that, but that's not what I would expect. I would expect a move up to these moving averages and then a shallow pullback and something like this. So if I see something like this, then I would basically say that market is getting ready to turn. And you want to see the same thing. And you want to see MACD turn like this way, similar to what happened right here. You want to see the MACD cross and starts to move higher. So at the moment, we don't have that. As I said, that's because we are on week 3 of a possible 4 to 6 week consolidation. So market may need a little bit more time to basically form the kind of pattern, and complete the weekly consolidation. So that's basically what I'm looking for. So in terms of level, as I said, 352 is the level I'm looking at, using the weekly time frame, because that's where the weekly 20 EMA is. But it doesn't mean that it can't fall underneath that level. If so, then there are other levels to keep an eye on. Sometimes it may trade underneath the weekly 20 during the week, but watch the weekly close, like here. So it traded, underneath the weekly 20 during the week, but the candle finished on Friday right at the weekly 20. So that's entirely possible. So keep an eye on those. But otherwise, look for those signs in terms of structure and in terms of RSI to see whether or not we're seeing any signs. So that's QQQ, but we're not there yet from a bottoming point. As I said, another maybe couple of weeks of consolidation, base formation, that sort of things. SPY, I mean, the same thing applies. So I'm not going to talk about, the same things, but I'll just mention what are some of the levels. Again, if you look at SPY, you can see that the price action on a daily basis remains weak. The price is now below the daily 20 and 50 EMA. RSI is below the 50. MACD is now crossing below the 0 line. So, on a daily basis, it's weak and negative. But on a weekly basis, you can see that since this weekly low, the last time, it has gone pretty much straight up. And this is the first time we are seeing any kind of weekly consolidation. And the consolidation is basically moving towards the weekly 20 EMA. So the weekly 20 EMA at the moment is around 431. So on Friday, SPY closed at 436.50. What was the low? The low was 433. So it came very close to the weekly 20. Again, if you look to the left, as it was recovering from time to time, it would pull back to the weekly 20 right here. So it has done that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And even if you go to the left, you will see that weekly 20 or weekly 50 does provide some kind of a support. And then the time element also applies, because there are 3 weekly consolidation candles, but generally you see more than that. If you look at this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 consolidation candles. This one was a little bit more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then up. So generally, as I said, between 4 to 6 weeks, you see consolidation and then move up. You can see RSI is above 50, MACD. So I'm not seeing anything negative on a weekly time frame. I am seeing negative on a daily time frame. So the levels I would watch would be obviously the daily 20, which is the 431 level. Now, if it wants to pull back to the weekly 50 EMA, it can. That would still not jeopardize anything on a weekly basis. It just means that it would be a more deeper correction. If it wants to do that, yeah, it can do that. And the number there would be around 416. So let's see what happens, whether or not it can hold the weekly 20. And then if it breaks, then that would be the level I would be looking to. And that basically means that it will come back to this level. At the moment, it's at this level right here. So if this level is breached, then this would be the level I would be looking out for, which also brings the weekly 20 in play. In terms of, again, a reversal, same thing applies. You want to see that rally to these moving averages and a shallow pullback, and then whether or not you can see a structure like that. And you want to see RSI do something like this and reclaim the 50. And you want to see MACD turn the corner and do something like this. When you start to see that, like something like this, then you know that we've reached a bottom on a daily time frame. The consolidation is basically coming to an end. At the moment, I'm not seeing that. All I'm expecting right now is, because we're in very oversold condition, I'm looking for a rebound. So I want to see where the rebound takes us to. Whether the rebound takes us to the weekly, the daily 20 EMA. The daily 20 EMA right now is where? It's around 445. So SPY closed at 436. The daily 20 EMA is around 445. Sometimes it may try and go above on a intraday basis, but could get rejected, something like this, and then you want to see a shallow pullback and then do something like this. When you see something like this, you know that we're coming close to the end. So that's SPY. So let's have a look at some of the large cap tech stocks, because they're going to have an impact on the market. So let's look at Apple. Daily chart, same thing applies. Weak, after a strong uptrend, broke below the moving averages, and now you can see that it's underneath the moving averages. Moving averages are beginning to curl. But it is oversold. Look at RSI. RSI is in oversold territory. You look at stochastic. Everything you look at it is negative but oversold. So which means that a bounce is due. And if you look at the weekly time frame, on a weekly basis, you can see that since forming this weekly higher low, it has gone straight up. So now for the first time, we're seeing some kind of a meaningful weekly consolidation. I think this is healthy. So this has closed slightly below the weekly 20 EMA. Now it can do that, because if you look at right here and right here, it did close below the weekly 20 and then moved higher. So it can do that. On the other hand, if it wants to come to the weekly 20 and touch that, it can do that. So the weekly 50, the pink line, is around 166. Those would be the levels I'm looking. But I don't think the consolidation is quite over yet, because generally consolidations last for between 4 to 6 weeks. So I would expect some kind of a base formation around this level. Also, if you look at RSI, where's RSI? Is right at 50 level. This is a very, very important level. You can see it bounced off the 50 level right here. 50 level was a resistance right here. 50 level was a support here. 50 level was a support here. So RSI is at an important level. I would expect, if this uptrend is to remain intact, I would expect RSI to move up, and I would expect price to gradually move up, move up as well. You don't want to see RSI underneath 50 and hanging around, just like here. If so, then we have more weakness ahead. So I'll see how it reacts next week, but I would expect price to kind of stabilize here and then maybe move up a little bit, and RSI to hold this level. So it is at a neutral level. So I'm watching Apple to see whether I see some kind of a turn. Now on a daily basis, if there is a turn, obviously I'm watching these two moving averages, the daily 20 and 50, because they provided support previously. Now they're going to act as a dynamic resistance. So I want to see some kind of a structure building in Apple to see whether it does something like this. Let's say it moves up to the daily 20 and 50, which is around 182, 183 area, and then from there maybe a shallow pullback, and then does something like this. I think that would basically be positive. Similarly, you want to see RSI move up, maybe pull back a little bit and does something like this and reclaim the daily 50, and that would be a bullish sign to me. So we'll see how things play out in coming next week, and then we'll take it from there. Microsoft, similar story, so I won't go in detail. Pull back underneath the daily 20 and 50. So I'm looking to see whether or not, let me just show you something else on Apple. So I said that Apple is oversold. Now on a 4-hour basis, I'm beginning to see some kind of a positive divergence. You can see on a 4-hour basis, price made a lower low, but RSI didn't. You can see it even better on a 2-hour. You can see right here on a 2-hour, you can see that price made a lower low, but RSI didn't. So there's a positive divergence building that suggests that maybe Apple is getting ready for a bounce. So this is the level you want to see Apple taking out. The weekly, the daily 20 and 50 EMAs are around here, right here. So maybe it goes up to this level and then a shallow pullback and does something like this. So that's something to keep an eye on Apple. All right, moving on to Microsoft daily, similar story. So pullback underneath all of the moving averages, RSI is below 50, but on a weekly time frame, you can see that all we're seeing is that pullback. You can see the weekly higher low. This was the previous weekly higher low, and since then it's gone up quite a bit. Now maybe there's an opportunity to establish another weekly higher low. So in terms of structure on a weekly basis, I'm not seeing anything negative. Where is it now? It's at the weekly 20. If you look to the left, as it was recovering from COVID, weekly 20 came to the rescue a number of times, in an up market. And even if you go to the left, you will see that weekly 20 and weekly 50 did provide support a number of times. So that's exactly where it is at the moment. It's at the weekly 20. So I would expect some kind of a consolidation, and because it's oversold, I would expect some kind of a bounce. RSI is still above the 50 level, so I'm not seeing any kind of breakdown on a weekly time frame. So I'm actually looking at the daily to see if there is a bounce, whether or not it can take out this level. The moving averages are sitting around 326 to 328 level. So if you see something like this and then this, that would be positive, and you want RSI to get back above 50. So that's Microsoft. Tesla. Tesla is again On a daily basis, nothing surprising, strong move down, everything is negative on a daily basis. Just like Microsoft, Apple, QQQ SPY, no different. So let's have a look at the weekly time frame and see what are we seeing on a weekly time frame. So on a weekly time frame, after this big run up, Tesla is consolidating, and maybe it's in search of another weekly higher low. Since forming this low, it made a higher low here. Maybe it wants to form a higher low here and then move up again. Now, Tesla is at a very important level. So if you look at the levels, you'll notice that this level is right now in line with right here. So this is the previous high. Tesla broke through this level right here, and now it's right at that level. And this level, so there's quite a bit of support right here. You've got the support right here, you've got the resistance right here. So if Tesla needs to turn, it needs to turn right now. There are no ifs and buts. And look at the weekly RSI. Weekly RSI is just below the 50 level. Now it can do that. You can see that it had fallen below the 50 but managed to recover. So Tesla is now, it just needs to bounce. Otherwise it's gonna start to look weak. And you can see, if you can draw a trend line, you can draw a channel right now connecting these lows. My lines are not very good looking, but you can see that maybe I can show you if I let me show you the weekly chart. You can see, so here you can see that the lines are much better. You can now see the levels. You can see that this level is coinciding with this high, this low, and then if you draw a trend line connecting these highs and these lows, Tesla is right there. You can see that RSI is weakened a little bit, so Tesla can do that. Tesla, I think, is the weakest of the big cap stocks at the moment, but it is right there. If it goes underneath there, then it's going to start to look weak, and then the question is that going to form a lower high? So Tesla needs to turn, and it needs to turn now. Time is running out for Tesla. Further weakness, this whole weekly structure will start to look weak, and then RSI is going to fall further down. So it's not ideal, but Tesla needs to turn. So that's Tesla. Let's look at Nvidia. Nvidia reports earnings. So let's have a look at Nvidia on a daily time frame. First of all, Nvidia reports earnings next week. So not sure what the reaction would be, market's reaction would be after the earnings. But I would say that Tesla has held up better than the other tech stocks. It did show some weakness, but it managed to pull up right around this 400 level. It did pull back to, so after reaching a high of 480, it did pull back to 480, which is basically one of the areas I was expecting. But then it bounced, and then it held up quite well. You can see on a daily basis, MACD hasn't crossed. But in case of Microsoft and Apple and QQQ, MACD has crossed underneath the 50 level. RSI although it has moved up to the 50 level, sorry, this is the 0 level, I made a mistake. It hasn't crossed below the 0 level. RSI on a daily basis has come back to the 50, but it hasn't been able to close above. So this is quite interesting. And you can see the prices right now between the daily 20 and 50 EMA. So overall, I would say that it has held up much better. But if we look at the weekly time frame, on a weekly time frame, so the picture still looks quite strong. You can see very strong run up, but the pullback in my view hasn't been deep enough. This was the last weekly higher low. You might say this is a very shallow consolidation and then move up. I mean, when you compare where the price is in relation to the weekly 20 EMA, the price is still well above these two moving averages. And it hasn't even touched the weekly 20, like Microsoft and Apple did touch their weekly 20, but Nvidia hasn't. The weekly 20 is around 380. So this level is 380. and there's a big gap between the two moving averages. You generally don't see moving averages that wide. Whenever you see them wide, then there is a correction, and that correction basically fixes it. If you go to the left, any time where you see the gap between the moving averages starts to widen, something happens. There's a correction, and that fixes it. So this is one thing that still concerns me, is the fact that this pullback I don't think is deep enough. Having said that, I cannot argue with the fact that it is on a very strong uptrend. You can see RSI is above 50, so I cannot argue with the fact that this is on a very strong uptrend, right? Having said that, but at the same time, I would also say that this correction is not deep enough, and I don't know whether the earnings is going to be the catalyst that brings it down. I have no idea, but at this point, I still think that there is risk in the stock, only because this correction to me doesn't seem strong enough. But I'm not going to argue against this trend. This is a very strong bullish trend, and trying to short this I don't think is a smart move. So I would say let's wait for the earnings to come out, and then let's see what the reaction is, and we'll take it from there. If the reaction is to the upside, then it's going to go further and further away from these moving averages. In that case, I would say there will be even more risk. It's from a risk to reward, it's not going to be favorable, but you can't argue with the fact that this is a very, very strong bullish looking chart in that case. All right, let's look at Meta, and then we'll wrap it up. So this is Meta. Let's look at the daily chart. Again, daily chart would be quite similar. Strong move to the upside, now going through correction. RSI has fallen below the 50. Nothing unusual. On a weekly time frame, so this is basically what I am interested in, to see whether or not you can see that it's on a very strong uptrend. This was the last, I would say, proper weekly consolidation, and since then all we have done this, and now we're seeing some kind of a weekly consolidation. But at the very least, I would expect it to come and touch the weekly 20 EMA. Weekly 20 EMA is around 268. I think on Friday's low was 274, so that's like few points. It came close to the weekly 20 EMA, but I think this one still looks I just feel that maybe this correction is not deep enough, but that doesn't mean that it has to pull back. It can basically go sideways and let the moving averages catch up with it. So that's basically my view, but you can't argue with the fact that this is a very, very strong looking chart on a weekly time frame, and momentum indicators are still positive. So you can't argue with that. But the fact that after such a big run up, I would like to see either some kind of a pause, meaning it consolidates for a while, or maybe a deeper correction which provides an opportunity for buyers to step in. At this level, I would say there could still be some risk in the stock, but you can't deny the fact that this is a very strong looking chart. So that's Meta. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Please consider subscribing, following me on Twitter. I do provide updates during market hours through my Twitter account if I see opportunities. Otherwise, I thank you very much for watching the video. I hope to see you again in a future video. Thank you.